Hey everyone, this is Mark Schillinger, founder of the nonprofit Young Men's Ultimate Weekend. The Young Men's Ultimate Weekend is a wilderness rite-of-passage initiation event for young men ages 13 to 20. Thousands of young men from all different economic, academic, social, and racial backgrounds have successfully graduated from this initiation. And this is a life-changing event for young men, and it combines a weekend full of outrageous fun with what I like to call resiliency training. And by that, I mean this. Our mentors are experts at creating physical, mental, and emotional exercises that challenge or stimulate the parts of the brain that young men must develop at this age in order to build self-confidence, skills of responsibility and accountability, and leadership that they're going to need in order to make it in the young adult world. If you want to find out more about what we do, call us at 800-719-9302 or email us at info@ymuw.org. So today I am going to introduce you to Brendan Byrd. And Brendan is, if there was basically one guy who's been responsible for YMUW doing what we do so well, which is getting young men ready for the young adult world, it's Brendan Byrd. So I want to let you know that Brendan is not only a personal great friend and a family friend, but he is just so dedicated because he's put in, I don't know how many bazillions of hours, and I think he's been paid a grand total of nothing in terms of money, but thankfully he's been paid back in other ways, which we're going to find out on this interview. So Brendan, thank you for making the time to be here. And if you wouldn't mind, if you could just take a moment to let us know how you got introduced to this thing, that would be great, just to give us a little introduction.
Sure. Thanks for having me. So I began in 2005. I actually hurt my back, got referred to a chiropractor who turned out to be none other than Mark Schillinger. And he was talking about this thing that he does with young men. And I had grown up tutoring, done a lot of things in those world, was a coach, was working with youth, tutored youth and after school programs, all those kinds of things in the early days. So it was just a natural, easy fit. I went to the first weekend, was a crazy mess, and I was absolutely hooked. And I've been doing it ever since. I've been involved with the organization now for over 15 years, started as a mentor, worked my way up in management, had the bad habit of thinking, oh, we can do things better, we can do things better. And of course, if you volunteer to do things better, then you get to be put in charge of what you think can be done better in these types of organizations. And I just took it on. I then went on to be what's called a pack leader and guide all the mentors. Then I was the ringmaster who interfaces and leads the weekend, kind of master of ceremonies, directly interacting with all of the young men. On to the event manager. I've been a past board member, so I've been around this, been around the loop several times at this point.
And not to mention that Brendan is also a daddy and a spouse, of course, and got his own family and his own business. So we're talking about a guy who is so dedicated to what I would say the well-being of the whole world, because he, like me, is passionate about seeing that the world is filled with happy and healthy families, because we both believe that if there's young men coming out of happy and healthy families, the world's going to be a better place. And that's why we're all in it, really. So thank you for putting in all that time. Let's just break down the job responsibilities a little bit. I know you mentioned pack leader. If you wouldn't mind just taking a moment to kind of give viewers who have no idea how outrageous the YMUW is, what's the importance of that job? What do you actually do? And then we'll talk about the ringmaster and, of course, being the event manager, which runs everything.
Sure. So our organization believes we take these young men and we believe in pushing them physically, but also at the same time, putting them in situations where mentally they have to just kind of deal with what the challenge is. And one of the first challenges is we put them all up together and we divide them up and put them on teams and we put them in competitions, all fun competitions. But at the end of the day, it's pretty natural. You want to win, you want to do well in that competition. And so we begin to encourage that to rise up. So we have all these mentors on all the teams, just kind of working with the young men, being there, kind of grumpy uncles, but also engaged. Think of like, when your best uncle, growing up, the person you probably identified was someone who was 10, 15 years older than you in the family. And that was just somebody you always looked forward to. You would go to the event if Uncle so-and-so was there. And that's kind of what these guys are. And they come in, they swoop in, they work with the young men over the weekend, and then we all disappear at the end of the weekend. And so the pack leader's job was to manage all those mentors, listen to them, and deal with the challenges that they were having. Because it could be as much as, our team is just giggly and not doing much, which might mean they're actually really young, on the young edge. Or it could be guys just are really not engaging, are just really angry, are not talking, are just refusing to get up off the ground at times. It goes the whole spectrum. And so you need somebody with experience who can kind of help and give advice to these mentors. And that is the role of the pack leader. He's present. He's at all the circle ups. He's wandering around all weekend. He understands. He's been in the shoes of the mentors before, but ultimately he and the ringmaster are the men who will directly lean in and help these mentors through the course of the week.
One thing I'd like to throw in there is for you viewers, like when Brendan's talking about the pack leaders, again, these are the men, who keep the mentors going. So when he refers to circle ups, like before every meal, the young men will be eating somewhere, and Brendan, as a pack leader or the pack leader, really checks in with the mentors, these men, very closely, like how are they doing? Because their emotional stuff can come up too. They may have flashbacks to when they were a kid and they were not having their stuff together, and now they're not feeling like they're ready to go back in there and mentor. And it's men like, Brendan, who have to quickly put their minds together and send them back in there. So it's a really important job. So in addition to being the pack leader, Brendan has also been the ringmaster. And he's going to describe that job, because the ringmaster is not only in charge of the mentors, but he's in charge of really all of the young men as well. So it takes a certain kind of guy to have the chutzpah, the balls, to go in front of 150, 200 dudes and lead them all. So Brendan, you've been there many times. If you want to describe a little bit about what that job is like and what it's been like for you to do that, we'd love to hear it.
Sure. And this feels like a good time to point out, when I got into all this, I was scared to speak in public. I always held back. There was always things I wanted to say, and I didn't speak up because I didn't want people looking at me. And so it's been a transformation for 15 years where now I don't care. And I'm disappointed if there's not 100 to 200 people in the circle by Saturday evening. The ringmaster really is, it's the master of ceremonies. It has got to be the ideal three-dimensional man leading that circle. So you want someone who's strong, you want someone who's present, you want someone who is well-read and literate. You want men and young men to look at that man and say, I want to be like that man. I want to identify with that man. And you want to try, as the ringmaster, you really want to try and identify and link up with every young man present. And the men are going to get something out of it too. They always do, out of the experiences. But our energy is really focused on the young men. So it's a little bit over the top. It's a combination of, the drill sergeant, the counselor in school, the favorite teacher, the coach, the father, the ideal father, the grumpy uncle. And then it's about being human and letting them see you mess up from time to time and being okay with messing up and how you handle it. And you reminding them that, life is about wins and losses, and how you deal with both matter to your ultimate future success. So it just becomes an experience where you want to be the ideal male.
Mm-hmm. I remember when we were writing the manual in the year 2000, when we started YMUW, we were trying to think about the most powerful way to describe his presence, right? And I remember we were saying that this is the man that we would love young men to remember, on their deathbed, like who really influenced them the most. Hopefully their father and their uncle, as you're referring to, and, maybe their grandfather, but that this man would be like one of their top mentors. That's how important we hold this job. And just trust me when I say that watching Brendan, transform from somebody who doesn't like to speak in front of people to leading hundreds of men at a time has been a great thing. And the personal growth that mentors and volunteers get at YMUW is really critical for me as the founder, because that's my background is personal growth, spiritual development. So to hear you say that makes my day. It really, really does. And as you know, so many volunteers who've been at the YMUW have seen their lives improve just by being involved. Okay, last thing. When I said at the beginning of this program that probably if it wasn't for Brendan, God knows where we'd be now, the last 15 years, I'd say about the last maybe 8 or 10 years, he's been the event manager, which means now he runs everything. He's in charge of not just the agenda side, which is all about the young men, but also what we call the production side, which is getting all the supplies to the weekend, making sure all the volunteers know what they need to do, making sure the volunteers on the production side are communicating with the agenda side. And trust me, if you're a parent watching the show and you have a young man and there's 100 young men there, or 50, or we've once had 200, you know that a lot of things can change quickly. So it's the event manager who's got to keep that all together. To me, the event manager is the ultimate parent. So if you would love to describe that for a moment, that would be great.
Sure. That's my second favorite role after being the ringmaster. I really think being in there, being able to look eye to eye with all the young men is by far the most rewarding experience, and they keep me young for it. But as the event manager, it is, you think about it, if you think about it, we have a master of ceremonies, we have Brad Pitt, who's in front of the audience the whole time. And then we have the guy behind the scenes, who's the stage director. We call that the production team manager. And then over them is the producer, the event manager. He's in charge of everything. So his job starts at minimum 6 months before the weekends even begin. He's got to help make sure assemble the team that's going to be there. We got to make sure that the advertising is out there, and the enrollment of young men and registration and how that process is going. He handles all the outreach and the coordination, and he's working with different teams the whole way. Ultimately we have a 16-week timeline that we follow when we get closer to the production. So that's 4 months out. We have weekly phone calls. He leads all those phone calls leading up to that. We have a development and trust day where we train. We bring all our production staff members out together, and we spend a whole day working over the program and understanding what we do and training, and really also getting just to know each other and just binding that much stronger as a team, because it's really about the relationships that the men have together that will really show up in front of the young men. Yeah. If the men show up with no problem and able to stay on point, the young men will follow and fall in place. Yeah. So it's all of that stuff. It's writing the agendas and knowing how things are going to be implemented. It's making sure that the background checks for all the volunteers are complete. It's speaking with parents before and after the event. It's a little bit of everything.
Yep. And with regards to your own personal growth from all this 15 years later, because before I ask you to talk about some of the things as a ringmaster that you've taught young men, some of the expressions we use, which, I'll bring up and then you can elaborate, because I want parents to really learn something about how to deal with their sons, because we've learned a ton. And just so you viewers know, Brendan is a parent, and he has a son, Pablo. How old is he now? 6 or 7?
Pablo will be 7 in November.
Yep. So, I think Brendan once said to me, I'm going to continue volunteering until my son does his Young Men's Ultimate Weekend, and then I'm going to retire. So thankfully, we still have another 6 or 7 years out of Brendan for this. So I'd love to ask you honestly and really profoundly, what are the changes that you've gotten from being so involved with YMUW, with the men and with parents and young men? Like, what have you grown in? Obviously, as a public speaker, as you said, but, just what else have you noticed about yourself that has propelled you, motivated you to put in thousands of volunteer hours?
Well, I first started doing this work. Like I said, I've always been drawn to volunteering and to helping and want to be positive in the community. But what really drew me to this work, and men's work in general, I'm on what's called a men's team and have a support group around me as well, is I really got tired of seeing 25 and 30-year-old men playing video games all day and not going to work. And it just really struck me that, our society was getting stuck, and, certain people were progressing and certain people were just stopping. And so we always talk about the proverbial young man who lives in the basement, the 35-year-old failure to launch, all those kinds of things that have kind of over the years become bigger talking points. I saw those and I just never quite understood them. Now, I was lucky. I grew up with a father in my household. My father, very quiet, but very steadfast, got up, went to work every day, raised a family, was always there and involved. My mom told him where to be and he made it. They worked very well as a traditional team. He was always at my soccer games or my sporting events or things like that. And so I wanted to be that. And that's the role that I know. And what's happened as we have so many single parent households, or, both parents have to work, we have so many more just latchkey kids, we used to call them years ago. They're just on their own after school until the parents get home. And then if we're exhausted, it's really hard to work with them. I mean, I know I have a almost 7-year-old son and a 4-year-old daughter. My wife and I both work. It's not easy, but, I think how lucky we are to have each other and to be married and working together. I can just imagine how hard it is to be a single mom, right, and to know what to do with this, with your young man. Mm-hmm. And as they grow up, they want to move around and they want to keep doing things. And boys just naturally find a way to get in trouble more than girls in those adolescent years. They just have more energy and they just need to keep moving. Right now, during COVID, my son is playing with 3 girls. And so he's being very nice and helping his little sister dress the Barbies and do these different things and playing with the girls. But, all of a sudden I run around and he's just running across the house and zipping around and acting like a little boy and going absolutely crazy. And the girls are kind of quiet. And that's just naturally where it's at.
Yeah. So with the changes, like, again, I was asking you, what are some of the things that you've grown into and what have you become and how you've evolved from YMUW? I'm going to keep it on you for that question, that answer.
Sure.
Certainly relating it now, obviously, to your household, being married, having children. How has the YMUW, sort of prepared you for that, or helped you personally, or certainly in your family? What have you learned?
Sure. So, it just grinds into me that we really, the small stuff really matters about life. There's another author, Richard Rohr, who I enjoy his reading, and he's actually a Franciscan priest. And at the end, his conclusions are, there's realities that we all have to accept. Essentially, they kind of boil down to life is hard. We're not that significant. We're all going to die. And so what that means for us is it's how we act and how we are with each other that matters. We look out in the world and there's social media and there's these superstar athletes and there's all these things. And of course we all want to be that, but 99.9% of us aren't going to be that. So it's how we are with each other and how we act. And so I've seen the same things at YMUW. It's about the little things. Is the meal prepared and on time? Are the men attentive and following instructions and having a no problem attitude? Are the men enjoying themselves, or are they getting ragged and run down? Because the reason those things matter so much is because the young men are constantly watching us for their cues. Mm-hmm. If we have a no problem attitude, if we are engaged as the adult males at these gatherings and having a good time, the young men will quickly follow suit. And then it begins to just open up an energy that's just indescribable. You really have to be there to understand it. One of the things that's always impressed me and keeps me coming back is you will bring in all these young men, and there would be anywhere from, a small weekend would be like 30 to 40, and the big weekends are approaching 80 and 100 these days. We used to go bigger, but we don't like to because it loses some of the effect and you get lost in the size. But so many of these young men don't want to be there. If your young man says he doesn't want to be there, great. You're on to something. Get him there. If he wants to go, great, get him there. This really is one of those experiences where you just have to go through it. But what really impresses me every year is all these young men come in Friday night. We're in these giant circles. So the first circles will be, 75, 100 people already. Saturday night, they'll get even bigger. But these young men are looking down. They're kind of kicking at the dust. They don't want to be there. They're bitter. They don't want to have contact. Saturday morning kind of goes the same way. But something happens over the course of Saturday where we have them moving around so much. We really don't let them slow down and get into their complaints about, oh, I'm tired. Oh, I don't want to do this. They're busy. They're going places. They're discovering things. They're realizing they can do things on their own. We're letting them make all sorts of decisions. They're falling down. They're getting scrapes. And they're getting themselves back up. And what happens is it's almost like we have them on a string, and Friday night their heads were down and their hoodies were up and they don't want to talk to you. And come Saturday afternoon, you've pulled that string and they're standing straight up and they're eager and there's smiles on their faces and they're listening and they can't wait for what comes next. And that's just, I get the same thing out of the experience for myself.
Right. So, and I want to relate what you're saying to what you started to say earlier, which is that it's the little things, because I'm trying to relate this now to parenting, right? And these really important things, because I want the parents to learn some of the secrets that we have there. And like you said, you pay attention to the details. You also said that you feel for parents who have to work and it's hard to pay attention to the details, right? So I would like for us to kind of elaborate on some of the key points that you and I have learned together, literally, being in front of so many thousands of young men. So I just want to give out a couple of expressions that we use when we're training our mentors that I think would help the parents. Okay. And I'd like to have you elaborate on them. One of them, thank you. So one of the key points that I know when I'm coaching parents and coaching young men is I let them both know that you have to give respect to get respect. And I know we're drilling that into the heads of the young men, but I think that's important for parents to hear. So for you as a ringmaster and a pack leader, somebody who's been in front of young men, please elaborate on that so that you can help parents understand that as a parent, as a ringmaster, you just can't tell them what to do. You've got to show some respect first. Yeah. So if there's anything you can say about that, I would really appreciate that.
Sure. I mean, it's the key, another one is knock it off and move on. So, if you want respect, you got to give respect. We want to treat our neighbor like we want to be treated ourselves. So we have to emulate that. And it's real hard in our world and we don't think about it. We have so much TV and phones and everything else. I'm at a point where I'm getting tired of my kids asking to watch YouTube, and they kind of just YouTube kids and they just kind of disappear into it when it's there. But you know what? At the same time, I read the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal on a daily basis, and it's on my phone. So I'll be reading the paper and doing these things, but they can't distinguish between what it means to be reading a paper and a book digitally or watching a video for them. They're just too young. And I think that's probably true all the way through the adolescent years. So when we don't segregate, we need to just show the respect by putting the digital device down, both of us are making the sacrifice. If you want to read, pick up the book. I actually got the Wall Street Journal print edition to just set a better example for that, to make these separations. If you're not willing to do something, if you're not willing to model the behavior, then don't be surprised if they don't want to do it. None of us want to take out the garbage, but it needs to go out. So take out the garbage a couple of times and don't do it with complaint. You don't care if they grumble and what have you, but if they pick up the garbage and take it out, then mission accomplished. Yeah. Same thing, with doing your homework and whatnot. We have to do these things. Don't get into a power struggle about it. It needs to be done. If it's not done, well, then there's a consequence. Well, again, don't get into a power struggle. Understand that you gave them a consequence. So if you didn't do the homework, enact the consequence.
Right. And one of the things that we
keep it away from that.
One of the things that Brendan and I know Corey, who you viewers will meet also, who's also been a ringmaster, we'll often define a consequence, because I know in my work coaching young men, they'll say, a consequence is just another word for punishment. You're just a mean person. And so I want you viewers to know that when Brendan uses the word consequence, they will often at the Young Men's Weekend define that as it's a direct result of your own behavior, right? It's natural in this universe. Consequences are real. And so when Brendan at the Young Men's Weekend, gives a consequence, there's nothing punitive in his voice about it. We're just letting young men know, and I'm recommending you parents to do this too, that when you tell a young man there's a consequence for something, it's a way to get him ready for the challenges of the adult world, because that's what's going to happen when they get out there. So we want to stop protecting them from that is really what I would say.
Can I follow up on that?
Yeah.
So for some reason, consequence has a negative connotation in our society. And if you take the time to look it up in the definition of the consequence, I don't know it exactly, but it essentially is the result of an action. So what I tell the young men when we're explaining consequences, because we do have consequences at the YMUW, is I say, what happens if you are driving 75, 100 miles an hour in a 55 mile an hour zone? And they say, well, obviously you get pulled over by the police and you're going to get a ticket. And I said, okay, well, what happens if you were driving super fast at the Indianapolis 500? What's the consequence of that action? And they kind of take a step back and realize, wait a minute. If I apply, it's not about where I'm doing it. It's about what I'm doing. It's about where I'm applying it. So if you speed on the street, you're going to get a ticket. If you speed on a raceway, you might win the race and win the prize. And they get that.
Beautiful. You mentioned something else before also that I really want parents to learn from you, please. You mentioned the phrase, knock it off, and then move on. I know as a poor parent in my early days, before the bell went off and I learned how to change my parenting style, when my kids didn't, do what I asked them to, I would just keep nagging them and hounding them. And even when they did do it, I'd bring it up for days later. I'd put it on the list, right? And bring it up whenever it was convenient. So if you can explain what I think is a very profound philosophy as a way to show respect to their sons, what knock it off, move on means as it relates to respect and consequences, that would be great.
Sure. Well, it's just as simple as it sounds. Knock it off and move on. You've got to deliver whatever it is you intended to deliver and then keep going. We all have jobs. If we belabored on one point and kept on that and kept on that and kept on that, we would be deficient everywhere else in our responsibilities and it wouldn't work. It's the same thing with parenting. And I think an easy way to look at it is, we always know when the outside coach comes and tells our son something, or the teacher tells them to do something, they're able to do it, but they can't with us. Well, that's because we're kind of locked in this battle with them, and we can't reach this point where we just give them some instruction and move on. And if the cleaner you can make that, usually the better the results are with the family. It's when you get locked in and keep coming back to something that you can't move on that it is. So you just simply ask them to knock it off and let's move on.
Yeah, thank you. And one last one before we get back into, I want to ask some questions about you and what it's like to really lead men. Because I think male leadership, of course, is taking a bad hit right now. And in some cases it's appropriate. In other cases it's not. So I want to, come to that in a few moments about male leadership. But this one last point that we often say to young men, we don't like to sugarcoat. That's what we teach the mentors. So we use that expression a lot, like life is not fair, and we don't like to sugarcoat. So I know in my coaching with parents, I'll use the expression to them, stop parenting, stop mentoring, like stop doing so much or stop protecting them so much, right? Let them experience that life is not fair. So one last thing I would like for you to expound upon, Brendan, if you could, in terms of like a parenting tip, is the expression, life is not fair. We're always teaching our mentors that we don't want to sugarcoat for young men. And I know sometimes parents can kind of overdo it and protect their sons and not want to have them feel the pain of losing something. I know when I'm coaching parents, I'll often tell them that they should stop parenting and start mentoring, meaning stop protecting them and stop doing so many things for them. Let them feel all aspects of life. So if you could relate that to how that works at the YMUW or the things that you tell them and how it might relate to parenting, that would be great.
Sure. So life is not fair is just a reality we all have to get used to. And it's very hard in this day and age. People want to make things as comfortable as possible. But I can tell you as a professional in a business that if I make things comfortable for my clients, it doesn't go well because they just get used to it and it's an unsustainable cycle. And it's the same thing for home life and it's the same thing at YMUW. One of the classic examples we give is, we want to treat these young men like young adults. So when they show up on Friday night, guess what, guys? There's no curfew. We don't care when you go to bed. And if you're late to breakfast, which is at 6 a.m., you don't eat. And just kind of goes across the whole thing. Now, there's more to that statement, right? For starters, so you can do whatever you want theoretically, but you got to be respectful. There are people, like myself included, who want to get some sleep that night. We have this thing called cleanups, where if you do something wrong, you clean it up and move on. So these young men don't know it. It's Friday night necessarily. They don't grasp it and understand it. But if they show up late for breakfast in the morning, we can find a way for them to restore themselves back to integrity and eat. And it's the same thing, for the home life. You've got to find ways when we set the boundaries and we set rules and we have a consequence that we just enforce it and we go on. The consequence or the cleanup that we have most common at the YMUW is 20 push-ups. And the reason we do it is it's mindless, it's physical, it's kind of silly, and it just allows you to step in, to do it, and then move on, and it's forgotten about and nobody thinks about it anymore. And to kind of illustrate that point, over the weekend, we change it up. We do a bunch of silly stuff. Young men might be doing dances or something else. Something we call a roach. You're rolling around on the ground. You're all dirty. And, at first people are like, oh, you got to be kidding me. The young men love it. The old men love it. The mentors love it. And it just becomes part of the bonding experience. Right. So if you can continue to bring those things back to your home, to your family life, it will help. And it all comes from knock it off and move on, not getting caught up in emotion and in the moment, but just having faith that we'll restore and find our center again as we keep moving forward.
Right. And one thing that's really important, when the adult men are not obeying the guidelines or the rules, they have to clean it up as well. And so for you parents, whatever you're trying to teach your sons, you have to emulate that too, because no matter how sophisticated we are, no matter how many comforts we have, it's still monkey see, monkey do. So everybody is engaged in these cleanups at the YMUW, and it's beautiful because we get that we have to be responsible for what we've stepped up to do. And if we don't do it, then we have to be accountable, which we often define as like owning what you should have done or not done without excuses. And by Saturday afternoon, the young men just get it. Like, we're not doing anything until you clean it up. And then they do. And by Sunday, they just get it. Everybody's going to clean up, and then we move on. And that's how families ideally should be, that we just handle it. But it's also for the parents as well. Okay, that said, Brendan, what I'd love for you to talk about a little bit here is, as you and I know, it really does take a village to raise young men, and parents don't have that anymore, right? As you were alluding to earlier, we're all isolated, especially with COVID, and even without COVID, we're all just on our devices so much that we're in our own worlds. What's the magic, or what's some of the magic that happens when the young men see that there's at least the same number of adult men as there are young men there to run that weekend? It begins on Friday night where they show up with their big FU, like, we ask them for their cell phones and they don't want to cooperate. And yet by Sunday, they don't want to leave, basically. They love the men. We've treated them with respect. But what is it about that village effect? Could you speak to that at all, how that's so effective?
It's one of the mystiques. And it's really become one of my underlying goals that, young men show up, they don't know what to expect. It's set up so that in such a way, literally, there'll be 100, 200 people showing up, men, and they have no idea who any of these men are. And these men will look them in the eye and shake their hand and tell them, welcome to being a young man. We're here to support you. And so it ends up, hopefully my goal, long-term goal, is that it sets an expectation in their mind that they should be open and willing to talk to people, because they don't know that person might have been one of the men either at their initiation or some other young man's initiation, ready to help them. And it's, we have this idea where we don't want to ask for help. We can't trust anybody. We are scared, and all we hear on the news are about bad things, whether it's shootings or child abuse or all these different things. We don't want to go to Cub Scouts. Can't trust the male teacher. Just so many negative connotations. We've forgotten that there's so many opportunities out there to trust and to learn, to grow. And so what I want the young men at the end of the day to learn is that the world is a really big place. They are learning and quickly acquiring the tools to be successful in it. And it's about how they approach the world that will determine their success.
Thank you. There's something magical that happens. There is a mystique. When you put your son, if you're a viewer, if you're a parent, and he's in a circle with 150, 200 men and young men, something changes very quickly where they can't hide out anymore. And they're in a safe container, that's what we call it. And Brendan is brilliant at creating that container, as all the mentors are. And they start saying things out of the blue that I don't think they'd ever say in talk therapy. And so while we're big fans of talk therapy, in fact, Brendan's wife is a therapist, there's just some things that can only happen in that kind of ancestral setting. And that's how I interpret that mystique that Brendan speaks to. Brendan, I would love for you to just take a moment, if you would, to talk a little bit about we had Lisa Ling in 2019, right? She came to the event.
I was there.
We had that developmental training and training meeting that, we had all the volunteers over for 3 weeks before. I remember standing up and announcing that there was going to be a woman there. That didn't go so well. How would you explain, what was that like for you? Because of course everybody acquiesced and had her there. What was that like for you? You were in charge of that whole thing. I mean, at any time, either a young man or an adult man could have gone off the rails and just freaked out that there was a woman there. Granted, she's an expert, and she was amazing, of course, at being invisibly visible. But what was that like for you to be in charge of that whole thing? How did it go? I wasn't there, as you know, I was in the hotel with the parents doing their rite of passage. What was that like?
Well, it was a positive experience. We really made a point of working through whatever problems there were prior to the weekend. So if you showed up at the weekend, you were okay with what was going to happen. And at the end of the day, we're eternally grateful to Lisa Ling because she's the only reporter of prominence to step forward and do this. There are plenty of male reporters who could have stepped forward and did it, but they didn't. And so it just became another interesting loop to this weekend. Every weekend takes on its own identity, and these things are living, breathing organisms. We have an agenda, and we tweak it for the site, and we tweak it for the individuals, but we're really more or less following a model that we've identified and worked. We know what we're doing. But yet, when you put 100 people in a space, you don't know where it's going to go all the time. We all want to go there, but somebody goes there, and we deal with it. And now we have booms hanging down over the circles, and I was wired for sound, and other young men were wired for sound. It created its interesting obstacles, but again, we have such a no problem attitude. We realize that what we're trying to do is much bigger than any individual accomplishment for any person out there. And we had absolute confidence that the weekend would be guided and go where it needs to go, and it was. It also created some really cool experiences for us. We live in California where fire danger is always present. CNN, being CNN, needed help with lighting. So we got to go old school, and we got to set up tiki torches at midnight on Saturday night, which is something we never do anymore. But we worked with the CDF, and we pulled in some extra resources to make sure there wouldn't be a problem. A lot of dedication went into making sure that was safe and secure, and we had additional people there just monitoring the whole situation. So that was a benefit because it was super cool. We haven't done that in years, and we don't do it on a regular basis anymore. And at the same time, we had to accommodate Lisa and her schedule because she was moving between our site and Mark down doing the workshop with the parents. So we had to flip some things around. So of course there's the heavy sighs from management, but okay, we'll make it work. No problem. Because we understand that we have a goal for the weekend, and we have to get there, and everybody collectively works. And otherwise, it was a weekend as usual. And what we really realized quickly was that our young people today are extremely used to being on camera. So I think it was more of a challenge for the adult men and the older men than it was for the young men, because they're just used to being on camera and used to being filmed.
Right.
It was, at the end of the day, I think it was a terrific experience. I'm really looking forward to when the show airs.
Right. So hopefully I'm doing a screen share and you can see a picture of you there.
I saw one. Yeah.
So one last question, if I could.
Sure.
Thank you for making the time, because I know your kids are right behind that door behind you, waiting for you to come.
Pablo's at soccer practice. We're good.
Oh, okay, good. But Isabella, she's back there?
Isabella is watching or playing with Barbies.
Okay.
She's fascinated with Barbies right now.
So sweet. All right, last question. And again, as profoundly and as deeply as you can, why do men, adult men, need to volunteer at the Young Men's Ultimate Weekend or at any rite of passage? Certainly, I've already interviewed Brad Leslie, and we've talked about Young Men's Adventure Weekend. Why do men need to be there? What's the benefit? What are they going to get out of leaving the comforts of their home or their family or their spouse or girlfriend? Like, what is it that that adult men are going to get by showing up at a rite of passage?
So the men need to do the work because no one else can do the work. Men like myself are happy to step forward. But as I said earlier, the young men who are 15 are going to listen to the 25 and 30-year-old man much better than they're going to listen to me.
True.
I am the same age as their parents, if not a little older, the same age as their teachers. They're used to tuning me out. It's getting harder for me to do my job.
Mm-hmm.
I also have an experience and I'm happy to guide men. Which leads right into the next point. When I started this thing, I was in my early 30s and I was guided by a bunch of men around me who were much older and much grayer than I was. And they brought me up and taught me how to do these things. When I didn't want to speak in public, they taught me how to prepare a little bit. They gave me tips. On the flip side, I've learned how to handle myself in the woods better. I do not like camping. My grandfather defined camping as a 2-star hotel. I'm right there with him. But I know I have the right equipment because these men have taught me. I've gone out and done some interesting stuff and understand survivalness in a much greater extent than I ever did. And it just ends up opening up opportunities, and you cross and you push through barriers that you didn't even realize you had or that you maybe didn't even care about. You will become a better listener. You will become better at asking questions. You will learn to be a little more patient. You will learn to endure a little more because it's uncomfortable. It's not often that we go 3-4 days without a shower and sleeping on the ground, so it just gives. And I promise you, you will never receive a better paycheck than you do on that drive home Sunday evening. That's why I keep coming back. And that's why men keep coming back. And in fact, I talk about the paycheck a lot. It's indescribable what you get from it. So I would encourage every man to come out there and do it. 1,000 years ago and in cultures even today, there's just no thought that we wouldn't do this. But today we live in a society where it is. There's an old proverb, African proverb that essentially says, if you do not initiate the young men, they will burn down the village. And right now we are not initiating young men and we are burning down the village. So, every man, it is our obligation and our duty to come out and do this.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you. So for all you viewers, if you have a son that's 13 to 20, I don't know what to tell you other than he needs to be at the Young Men's Ultimate Weekend or some other rite of passage initiation. And I also believe that parents need a rite of passage as well to stop parenting so much and to start mentoring and start getting ready for the next chapter of your own life. So if you want more information about the Young Men's Ultimate Weekend, call us at 800-719-9302 or email us at info@ymuw.org. And I really thank you so much for making the time to listen to Brendan, and really contact us. Either he or I will be getting back to you, or somebody who's really in on YMUW and would know how to respond to you. So thank you again. And we hope that you watch the other videos that we're creating so you can meet the men behind the Young Men's Ultimate Weekend.